Today we will be going over a lesson plan for the Progressive Era in a history textbook built for middle schoolers. First, we will go over text structures that will be important for us to go over with our students. First, explaining the importance of the bolded headers. So for this particular one, they need to understand that this section is about Roosevelt and progressivism, and then the red, One American Story, the rise of progressivism, all of that, they actually need to read that, which, as we all know, students can sometimes tend to skip things. Looking at the primary sources, in this particular slide, there is a quote from a witness to stuff happening in a mental asylum. So it's important to note that the quote is from an actual person who actually lived through this. This can help increase student understanding and the connection that they can build by understanding that real people went through this. Sometimes there's a cognitive disconnect between the fact that the kids that are living now might have been living back in history. So that getting rid of that gap can help with history. And then the highlighted words will be important, and they should list them all so that they can know that they should use them for the Freyer model that will be used later during the lesson. Additionally, there will be captions on the photos. This will be important to note for the students. This particular caption is about Booker T. Washington dining with President Roosevelt at the White House, and it also has a question that the students should be able to answer. Speaking of answering questions, there are section assessments. Those will be important ways for us to analyze reading comprehension during the students' reading. So, for the anticipatory event, before we even open the textbook with our students, we're going to have them watch a video. It is a parody of Rihanna's Umbrella about the Progressive Era. This is both going to help them with some prior knowledge before they jump in, especially some prior knowledge that's initially entertaining, and then that entertainment element is going to help them get connected to the material before they even really jump into it. So that connection and that entertainment value will feed into the ability to sit through and read the text, hopefully without complaining. After that, the students will be given a graphic organizer that they will have to fill out once they are done with the textbook reading, or as they're reading it. I personally would let them choose. This will compare and contrast the different aspects of the progressive movement, and this really allows them to think differently about all of the different movements and the positives of this part, the negatives, and then the neutral, just factual statement. This also allows them for a little bit of fact and opinion, which is an important SOL subject in their language arts class. So that's bringing in some stuff from other things. So this will be helpful for them to contemplate. It'll really improve their critical thinking skills in terms of their social studies aspect. And then this is the same graphic organizer filled out. So for instance, the women's suffrage has women could vote and improved equality for women as positive. The negatives, it increased political tension and not all women supported it. And then the things that aren't positive or negative is it led to the 19th Amendment. So there's fact, there's opinion, but then there's also just like the historical context of, well, this was negative. It was bad that there was political tension, but then it was good that women could vote after that. And then it also goes through it for workplace reform and the temperance movement. And then the kids can really compare and contrast the different movements, and this will help with their ability to understand what's going on as well. For the vocabulary, some examples of vocabulary words, we had temperance, strike, industrialization, suffrage, monopoly, and reform. But obviously, the textbook had many more options for the students to choose from in terms of vocabulary. Now, if I were going to be teaching this lesson on my own, I would have this Freyer model, and I would have the students list out all of the vocabulary words that they didn't know, maybe didn't understand, maybe that they'd never seen before, and then I would have them pick at least 3, but more if they want to, to fill out a Freyer model for. So now let's go to an example of a Freyer model filled out for one of these. So we did monopoly. So it includes the definition, which is a monopoly is a business that controls all of one aspect of commerce. We have the characteristics that are important for us to remember about monopolies in order to remember the terminology. So they have no meaningful competitors. They're able to drive out smaller competition. They control prices. And then we have the examples like Rockefeller's Standard Oil, the Carnegie Steel Company, the Vanderbilt Railroad. And then for non-examples, I use more modern day products like Pepsi and Coca-Cola or Barnes & Noble and Books A Million, just to kind of show the difference between the way that companies function now versus then, but also because there's not really examples of monopolies nowadays, which is important for the kids to note because it will help them remember things like antitrust laws. Now for the questions, these are questions that we could ask the students just to get their brains thinking, some critical thinking going on, some connections to the content. So we have who benefited from making safer working conditions? What are some safety rules we have to follow today? Why might people want to make alcohol illegal? In the board game Monopoly, what's the goal of the game? So what's probably the goal of a real-world monopoly? Are there any examples of modern-day monopolies? How did women get the right to vote if women couldn't vote to give women the right to vote? Why might business owners not want to improve the safety of their business? Are there any improvements we could make today for safety? Do strikes and unions still exist today? If so, can you think of any examples? And if alcohol were made illegal today, what do you think you would change? So that is like a good mix of things that are straight up just like, why are the people in the past doing these things? What connections can we make to some modern day things, like talking about the game Monopoly, thinking about the way that women even got the right to vote, different things like that. And then just adding that connection between history and now will really help develop the students' ability to understand and remember what they're learning. So for reading comprehension before, we have 3 thoughts. So just 3 questions that we definitely want to ask before they read. Today, what are some rules that exist for safety reasons? Write down as many as you can think of. If women couldn't vote, how might the world look different? Write down specific examples. And if someone asked you to explain why alcohol should be illegal, what do you think you would say? So these are definitely some things that the kids would be able to think about before they even get into the content. Even if this is before they've even watched the anticipatory event, they could still answer these questions because they would still be able to understand. But it's triggering them thinking about the different things that the progressive era talked about. Now, during the reading comprehension, as previously spoken about, we want them to do the section assessments. So while students are reading, they will be given stop, drop, and write points. So this will be twofold. So they're going to stop, drop, and write down their thoughts on what they've read and what they think might be important. And they're going to answer the section assessment questions. I feel like this will be important because not only are we putting in that section assessment, which will be helpful, they'll be able to assess themselves, but it also gives them the opportunity to write out their thoughts, take a pause, take a break, try to really absorb the information, and it increases their writing abilities because they're practicing their writing as they're learning in not just their language arts classes, but their social studies classes. After they're done, for reading comprehension, we'll use some reader's theater. This will really help get the kids into the headspace of the people who lived through this time. The play that I chose was about the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, just to fully immerse themselves into the historical concepts, and especially about one of the biggest workplace tragedies in American history. This not only leads into workplace reform, but also women's suffrage, because so many of the people who passed away in the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire were women who were working at the time. After that, I would finish up with a writing to learn activity. So the kids would choose between an immigrant, factory worker, a stay-at-home mom, or the owner of a bar. Then they're going to pretend to be that person in the 1920s and write 2 to 3 paragraphs explaining how one of the 3 parts of the progressive era, either the workplace reform, women's suffrage, or temperance movement, will affect them and their life. They're supposed to include 2 good things, 2 bad things, and how your person may feel about the changes. This really connects back to some of the stuff that they learned in the beginning, especially that graphic organizer, which talked about the good and the bad. But it also helps them connect deeper into the role of somebody who was living in the past. So the things we really want to build on are the critical thinking skills, and then the ability to connect with the past and connect themselves to these people. That will really help them understand why they need to be learning what they're learning, which will increase their ability to actually pay attention and memorize things. And after that, we just have our references. So that was the Progressive Era lesson. I hope you enjoyed, and thank you for listening.